Hi, everyone. I'm back with another candidate interview. Today's candidate interview is with Havener. Robyn loves serving her community and has even been awarded such honors as Rotary Service Above Self Award and the Broken Arrow Community Advocate of the Year by the Broken Arrow Chamber. She's also served on many boards around her community, including the Broken Arrow Rotary Club, which she's a president-elect for the year 2021 through 2022. Robyn has served on the Parent Teacher Association boards for Spring Creek, Childers, and the overall council. She's the current PTA board president for Childers Middle School, but her involvement does not stop there. She has been involved with Leadership Broken Arrow for about 4 years and currently serves as the executive chair. She's also the mother of 2 middle schoolers in Broken Arrow School District. My goodness, Robyn, that's a lot. How do you do all that?
Well, Aiden, a lot of planning, a lot of help. There is no way I could possibly do it all on my own. So a lot of support and then just trying to manage my time as efficiently as possible.
Mm-hmm. Right. So let's get to the questions. Why are you running for the Board of Education?
So Aiden, it's probably been on my heart to run for probably 2 or 3 years. So the way that Broken Arrow School Board works is that one board seat comes up every year. So even if you're like, yes, I really want to do that, you may be 3 or 4 years out before that particular board seat is available to run for. And so I've probably been thinking about it for that long. And public service has definitely been on my heart. Thought about city council, but because my kids are currently in Broken Arrow Public Schools and I just have a true and deep passion for educators and our public education system, I realized that that is where I really would want to invest my time and energy, is seeing how I could impact and help benefit our public education system here in Broken Arrow.
Right. That's awesome. So is there a particular issue you could say that motivates you to serve on the board?
I think there's a handful of things that really have prompted me. So I would actually start with, my daughter is in the gifted program at Broken Arrow. And for parents that have lived through the gifted program at Broken Arrow and all of the changes that have happened over the last 4 or 5 years, there's definitely some recognition that it maybe has not always served, particularly in the elementary years, the kids in the best way possible. I'm really thankful I sit on the Gifted Advisory Council as of this year. And so I do have a feel now for where we're going. And I think there's some really good things coming. And I think I can continue to encourage that progress. But when you have 25 to 27 kids, we've really got to get creative about how we diversify our learning in elementary to be able to meet the needs of all of those kids. It's complicated. So I think that's probably what initially motivated me. And then when you add in the fact that I'm just really passionate about emotional intelligence, mental health, I think if anything has become clear over the last 2 years, it is that we are in a society that desperately needs more support and more conversations around these topics. And we know that emotional intelligence can be one of the greatest factors for success for adults. And so how do we as a public school system, while it's asking so much of our teachers, also figure out ways to help our parents, our teachers, and our students gain those skills? So I think those 2 things are probably at the very top of my list of things that kind of motivated me and encouraged me to look at this as an opportunity.
Yeah. I remember I was in the gifted program when I was in elementary school. And it was really cool to me. So I'm really glad that there's a focus on improving that. And then
Yeah.
I know we talked
I was going to say, you probably experienced the Kaleidoscope program, and it's
Yep.
so different now than what it was then. And so, and I don't know if that's the right answer, is going back to a Kaleidoscope program, but I do think we've got to keep digging for how we reach every kid.
Right. I was part of the Kaleidoscope program, so I totally get where you're coming from. And then I know
Yep.
we talked about it earlier when I was kind of introducing you, but what particular experiences or skills have prepared you to serve as a board member?
So I will tell you, I think that there's lots of things that I've done that have helped me prepare me for serving as a board member. I think the LBA experience has been incredible. It's really connected the dots for me as a community member for how our city, chamber, and school system are intertwined. If you ever sit in and listen, they'll tell you it's a three-legged stool, and all three pieces have to be working well for our community to continue to grow and develop. So Aiden, you are a very intelligent young man who's doing a lot of really cool things, and we need a community that you want to come back and be a part of. And for that to be true, we have to have businesses that can provide you with a good living. You need a school system that you want to send your kids to. And we need great parks and services and fire and police and all of those things. And those three things are so connected. Companies won't come and settle in a community that doesn't have a strong public education system. So understanding that connection is really, I think, integral to being a school board member, because it's vital that the three of us, three different areas, work together to see community success. So that's a big part of what Leadership Broken Arrow has brought to me. And then really my service in PTA. I'm in the schools. I don't know that there's a year since my son was a first grader that I haven't been in their schools at least 40 to 60 hours. The last 2 years as president at Childers, I'm probably closer to 80 to 120 hours in a school year or even a semester. Just talking to the teachers and hearing from them, seeing the struggles of the students, and really understanding just how complicated it has all gotten and how much support that they need. And so it also allows me to hear directly from them and from the teachers and the students that are there right now, what the challenges are that they're facing, so that we can kind of identify how do we fix those or resolve those or problem solve for those in the future.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so what do you, well, I guess we've already talked about this, but what do you see as a major issues facing our school district?
Oh my gosh. So the things I kind of already talked about, and then I would even add on, particularly for Broken Arrow, we're going to be in a real bind around bonding. If people don't understand what that is, school bonds are all of the things that pay for the buildings. The school bonds can only be used one time, so it can't be used to pay for teacher pay raises, things like that, but it can be used to pay for curriculum or one-time expenses. So all of our buildings get paid for through bond money. And our last bond issuance was started in 2016 and approved by the voters then. And it was actually built to be a 10-year bond. And that is a problem because of the difference in costs and expenses from 2016 to now even 2022. And by the time the bond package finishes in 2026, so even the money that's built in is not going to cover the things that we expected it to. And Oklahoma state law has an interesting challenge in it where you can't go back and do a new bond issuance until a certain percentage of the bonds that are out there are paid off. So right now there's the potential that we couldn't go back and do new bond packages until in the 2030s. And if you can imagine the difference in Broken Arrow from 2022 to 2030 or 2034, it's super problematic. So the school board is really going to be tasked with being, we have to honor by law what was in the bond packages already, but we really are going to, the administration and school board are going to have to be creative about how we utilize those funds, and are going to really have to be knowledgeable about thinking very long term, and then advocating. We're going to need to advocate at the state level to look at the law that's in place to see what makes sense to maybe help us be able to go back and bond sooner, because we have one in the current bond package we have one more elementary school that we could build. We have one more middle school that we could build, and then a few other miscellaneous buildings, but that's not going to be enough. And so I think for me, that's something that I feel like people maybe aren't aware of. It's just not common knowledge, and we're going to have some big challenges if we don't figure out how to tackle that.
Yeah. I didn't realize that the bond issue was 10 years. So, I mean, I couldn't vote when the election happened. So,
right. Yeah.
And then,
and to be honest with you, this is back in 2016, and I would tell you, in Broken Arrow, we always want to be supportive of our schools. And so we typically approve every bond package that comes forward to us, because we know that investing in our community is a big deal in our school system. And I just think people didn't know that that was going to be the concern. And then, who could have imagined a scenario where building expenses and construction costs go up 150, 200, 300%. And now we can no longer do with the money what we expected to. So, but it's definitely going to be a big issue for Broken Arrow.
Yeah. So I know we kind of touched on this with like state laws and that kind of stuff, but what changes do you think should or could be made at the state and local level regarding public education?
I'm sure more than I could even tell you about. I think we always have to be looking at testing and how that makes sense or doesn't make sense. I know that people want accountability, and that's fair. I mean, it's fair to ask for accountability in an education system, particularly a public education system where your tax money is going to support it. But I think we have to figure out what that balance is between only educating to tests and in creating accountability. And so there may be some opportunity there from a state level to look at that. Obviously, right now, the bond package, the way that we have to have bonds paid back is something I feel like is going to be a priority for us, particularly in Broken Arrow. And I'm sure there's even more that I would say probably needs to be reviewed and looked at. And I think our legislators are generally, I have good relationships with most of our Broken Arrow legislators, and I'd say generally they're good human beings with good hearts who want great things for our community. Sometimes it's just hard to always know what the unintended consequences are of the things that you put forward until you've put it forward. And so I always think there's opportunity to go back and review and say, is that law that was put in place then that had the best intentions, did it accomplish what it was intended to do? And if it didn't, how do we update it so that it does?
Right. And then so these questions are from people in the community. And so our first one, it's kind of a longer question, but I'll try to make it make sense. So they say, what are your plans for handling bullying situations? We have a no tolerance bully rule in Broken Arrow, but it's not followed through on, in my experience in the 20 plus years since I've had children in Broken Arrow public schools. When do we start taking the side of the kids and making the bully and their parents be held accountable? So I guess the question there is what are your plans for handling bullying situations, pretty much?
Yeah, that's such a hard one. My kids have been on the other side of that. And I have a 13-year-old son and I love him deeply, but I'd probably say there's probably times when he has said things that are not appropriate or not kind because he's 13 years old and they're still learning at that age how to interact with people. So it's a tough situation. And let's be very honest, we have 19,000 plus students, almost 20,000 students, and we have 2,300 staff, but that's not all teachers, and they can't be everywhere in every circumstance to hear everything that's said. And kids don't always tell. They don't always tell when it's going on, or they don't always go and say, this is the moment that it's happening, and here's what this person said. And so then when does it come up? How does it come up? It's not an easy question to answer. Obviously, a zero tolerance policy is the first step, but this is where that mental and emotional health comes in. I think what we know pretty clearly is that kids that are bullying are hurting. And so we have to start with the fact that if somebody is doing some bullying, there's something going on. There's some reason why they are reacting in that way and they're hurting other people. And so, if we hear that somebody is bullying, it can't just be don't bully, right? If somebody is facing trauma or is hurting or is upset or angry, and we've all as adults, doesn't matter who you are, have lashed out at somebody you love in the moment when you're hurting or upset or angry. So we know how that can happen. We need to really work on why. Why are they doing that? Why are they expressing that behavior? Because if we can fix the why, then they stop bullying. When we just tell them don't do it, that is not necessarily going to achieve the result we want. And then the second part of this, and this is just, it's just hard. Listen, again, both of my kids have been subject to this. And obviously, we always work on, hey, we need to figure out what's going on with the bully or the person that's saying the ugly things. And then also, how do I teach my kids resilience? Because the reality is that bullying doesn't stop when you become an adult, particularly not in our society in this day and age. If you have an online presence anywhere, you are probably taking a chance you're going to get bullied at some point. People are going to say ugly things about you, and they're going to other you from everybody else. And so we need to teach our kids resilience. And that doesn't mean it's acceptable to bully. It's not, oh, well, this is okay, so I just have to teach my kids. No, it's both things need to happen. We need to work with these kids that are hurting, that are probably going through trauma at home, or maybe have been bullied themselves. And then we need to help our own kids understand that other people's words are not really about them. And how do we allow them and give them the resilience and the strength so that as they move forward and go out into the real world, they have the capacity to recognize that what that person says about me doesn't mean anything about me. And I think both are integral to this, right? It's not
Right.
one or the other. It's we have to do both together.
Yeah. And then the next question is, we've already talked about this a lot, but it says one of the best ways to support our children is to vote in bond elections. Do you regularly vote in bond elections?
So I will be very honest and say probably prior to 5 years ago, I was not great about knowing when I should vote and when I shouldn't. For me, what has really benefited me was a friend of mine introduced me to absentee balloting in Oklahoma.
Mhm.
And so because you're required to get a notary signature, I feel pretty confident that it's as safe as it possibly can be. And it helps me keep up with what's mine to vote on and what's not. So it's easy when there's a lot of communication about a lot of different things being voted on to miss what are the things that you in your community at your place of residence are legal to vote for. And so that has been really helpful to me in keeping up with what I need to vote on. So I get a ballot about 3 weeks before every election that I'm able to vote on. That gives me time to look it up and research it and understand it.
Yeah.
And so to the best of my knowledge, I've never voted no on a bond for Broken Arrow, but I can't tell you that I voted every time there was one because I'm
Mhm.
not sure that I always knew when they were ours and when they weren't.
Yeah. And that's kind of why I created this page was I just noticed people weren't being involved in local bond elections. And so
Huge.
yeah, just trying to help people get informed. And
Yeah.
then this next question says, since attending meetings and voting is your number one job as a school board member, how many school board meetings have you been able to attend in the past? Because I know you have a super busy schedule.
Yeah, so I will be very, very transparent. I've probably attended 2 or 3 actual school board meetings in person. I am beyond grateful that they have moved them to online so that we can watch them. That way, if I can't make it in person, which to be honest with you, sometimes Monday nights are bizarrely our one night we don't have a ton of kid activities. And so right now, at least, I've chosen to watch them online and usually go back and see what's going on that way so I can kind of keep in touch with what's been going on. So that's something I would for sure want to continue in Broken Arrow because I think it's a great way for people who can't make it to an actual board meeting to get a chance to catch up with what's going on. And I know our city council meetings are the same way. And sometimes I'm really good and go grab those too and watch them. And sometimes I don't. But you are correct. They're absolutely vital. I've got a couple things dropping off this year. I kind of set them up that way. So LBA will be done in May, and then I'll be done leading a PTA president in May to kind of give me a little bit more space and time to do the school board.
Yeah, I totally count online, watching them online, because so much stuff is online now. It's just like, I watched it. I was there. So and then
absolutely.
And then our last question for today is, will you represent the whole community, even if their views are divergent from your own?
Yeah, so you asked me earlier, like what some of the things I've done to prepare. So I sat on the long range planning committee for redistricting for Rosewood. And I think prior to doing that, I understood the concept of putting the community and the district first. And when you sit through that process, if anybody's ever sat through a long range planning committee for redistricting, you know you're affecting a lot of kids. And every choice you make is going to cause somebody to it not to fit for somebody, right? Nobody's ever going to be happy when their kids are going to have to move. And so that's hard. It's really hard. But ultimately, that is only my job, right? Is to serve the entire district. I think the benefit I have is that I can hear because my kids are currently in the district and will be for all of the 5 years that I would potentially serve. I think there's a lot of benefit to being able to hear from the parents and look for things that are themes, right?
Mhm.
That it's not just one parent that's upset about it, but we have a whole bunch of parents that are expressing concern. Well, then there's probably communication that needs to happen around why, things like that. But yeah, no, I think that there's nothing more important than recognizing that every person in this community is going to have their own point of view, their own life experiences that have influenced that point of view, and to respect that even if I disagree with it. And that also means sometimes, in fact, almost every time, no, you're never going to make everybody happy. You just have to do the best you can to look at the biggest picture you can, and try to see the long-term consequences of what you do to the best of your ability, and then make those decisions as wisely as possible.
Right, right. Well, since that was our last question, that's all for today. So I want to say a special thank you to you for joining me today, Robyn.
Absolutely.
And if anybody wants to, catch up with Robyn, see more from her, you can find her at Robyn Havener for Broken Arrow School Board Zone 2 on Facebook. And then I also just wanted to remind everyone that school board elections are on February 8th. So
Yep.
less than a month now. And
Coming up fast.
yeah, hope everyone has a great day and hope to see everyone next time. Thank you.